Some people are born lucky but don't know how to take advantage of their opportunities. And then there are people like me, Evelyn Evans, who understand their own worth and know exactly what they deserve. I have no intention of wasting my life on mediocrity. I wasn't born to live an average life, in an average apartment, with an average job, waiting for some average man to love me. No, I was born to have it all. Call me pragmatic if you want. But let's face reality, the world operates on a simple rule: the strong thrive and the weak are trampled. If I don't take what I deserve, then who will? I grew up in a middle-class family in California. Not poor, but not wealthy either. My parents were ordinary people with the typical mindset: work hard, and you'll have a stable life. I knew they meant well, but stability was never enough for me. I needed more. I needed power. I needed status. I needed a life that made others envious. That's why I seized every opportunity to get what I wanted. I didn't need a college degree to understand that women have two ways to succeed: either climb to the top on their own or find a man who can take them there. I chose the second option, but don't get me wrong, I'm not the kind of woman who relies on men. I simply know my worth and use it to secure the best life possible. That's why I worked at a prestigious company as a receptionist. Don't underestimate this job. I met dozens of successful men every day, and I knew one of them would be my golden ticket to the life I wanted. And then, I met Elijah Watson. Elijah wasn't the kind of man who radiated extreme wealth at first glance, but he had potential, a stable job in the booming tech industry, and a promising future. Most importantly, he came from a wealthy family. I remember our first meeting vividly. He walked into my office's partner company, polite but slightly reserved, clearly the good guy type, easy to control. I seized the opportunity immediately. A little flirtation, a little well-placed attention, and it wasn't hard to make him notice me. Everything played out exactly as I predicted. Elijah was drawn to me, and after just a few meetings, he asked me out. I smirked to myself. Men like Elijah were always this predictable. He thought he was the one pursuing me, but in reality, he was just another pawn in my game. Once I started dating Elijah, I made it a point to learn everything I could about his family. And what I discovered made it clear: this was the biggest opportunity of my life. Elijah's home was a massive, fully renovated estate, practically a mansion. I didn't care who had paid for the renovations. All that mattered was that Elijah lived there, and if I married him, it would become mine, too. But there was one problem: Miranda Watson, Elijah's sister. From the first time I met Miranda, I sensed an odd discomfort. She wasn't like the upper-class women I had encountered before. She lacked grace, sophistication, and the aura of a successful woman. I couldn't understand why a 30-year-old woman was still living in her mother's house. Miranda tried to act friendly, but I wasn't stupid. She was jealous of me, clearly. Women have a certain instinct about each other. I saw it in the way she smiled, a forced, uneasy expression barely masking her insecurity. She knew I was younger, more attractive, and about to become her sister-in-law. But at the time, I didn't pay her much attention. The most important thing was that Elijah was obsessed with me, willing to do anything to keep me close. When I subtly hinted at moving in with his family after marriage, Elijah didn't object. In fact, he even mentioned that his mother would be thrilled if I moved in. I smirked. Just one more step, and that mansion would officially be mine. I had played this game too well. I had chosen the right person at the right time, and nothing could stop me now. I deserved everything, and I would take what was mine, even if it meant pushing Miranda out of the picture. The only question was, how long before she realized it? I still remember the day I stepped into that mansion as its new mistress. It wasn't just a memorable moment, it was a declaration of my status. I had played my cards right, and now I was reaping the rewards. The moment Elijah agreed to let me move in with him and his mother after the wedding, I knew I had won. Other women might see this as a sacrifice. Living with a mother-in-law is never easy, but I was different. I wouldn't just live here, I would control this place, piece by piece. On my first day moving in, I stepped into the mansion with absolute satisfaction. Everything was spacious, luxurious, but undeniably off. The house was beautiful, but it lacked style, lacked the touch of a true lady. I walked down the hallway, running my fingers along the furniture. The wood was high quality, expensive, but the decor was outdated, even tacky. The paintings on the walls? Completely tasteless, undoubtedly chosen by Miranda. I pressed my lips together. It was time for a few changes. And that's when Miranda appeared. She stood leaning against the doorway of the living room, arms crossed, eyes scrutinizing me. She was assessing me. But the thing was, I didn't care about her assessment. "How does it feel to live here?" Miranda asked, her voice light but laced with something beneath the surface. I looked at her and flashed a flawless smile. "Wonderful. But I suppose you wouldn't know what it's like to live in a penthouse in the city, would you?" I saw the slight twitch in Miranda's brow, a tiny crack in her carefully maintained facade. Elijah wrapped his arms around me from behind, his voice full of warmth. "I knew you'd love it here, Evelyn." I tilted my head, pressing a soft kiss to his cheek. "Of course. This is our home, isn't it?" I emphasized the word our, making sure Miranda heard it. I saw her eyes narrow slightly, but she said nothing. The sign of someone realizing they were losing control. I didn't waste time. The very next day, I began establishing my place in this house. The kitchen, I told my mother-in-law that we needed a few small upgrades for convenience. Specifically, I ordered a high-end Japanese knife set, a French copper cookware collection, and replaced all the wine glasses with imported crystal. The living room, I suggested replacing the rug because the old one was too outdated. I proposed buying a new sofa in a modern cream tone, instead of the dark brown one Miranda had clearly picked out. Our bedroom. I replaced all the bed linens with Italian satin, added a large mirror so that every morning I would wake up to the reflection of a powerful woman. Elijah didn't object. My mother-in-law hesitated, but ultimately agreed. The only one who stayed silent was Miranda. But I could feel her discomfort. One evening, as I admired the newly styled living room, Miranda walked in, arms crossed, leaning against the wall as she watched me. "What exactly are you doing to this house?" I turned, raising an eyebrow. "Improving it. Don't you think it could use a little refinement?" Miranda gave a stiff smile. "I think it was perfectly fine the way it was." I shrugged. "Fine for who?" "You." I glanced around, pretending to take in every corner. "Maybe for some people, but I think Elijah and his mother deserve a more sophisticated space." Miranda's fists clenched. But I knew she couldn't do anything. I was here now. I was in control. She never said it outright, but I knew Miranda hated the fact that I had moved in. I watched how she avoided me more and more, how she silently left the room whenever I entered. Once, I caught her sitting alone in the library, staring off into the distance. Maybe she was wondering what she had lost. I smiled to myself. That was exactly what I wanted. But there was still one problem to handle. I had entered this house. But Miranda was still part of it. And that needed to change. I knew I was winning, but true victory didn't come from simply stepping into this mansion. It came from making Miranda realize that she no longer had control over anything. I didn't need to confront her directly. No shouting, no arguments, no desperate displays of power. No, the way to defeat someone like Miranda wasn't to fight her, it was to make her doubt herself, to make her lose faith in her own place in this house. So I started my game, slow and deliberate. People say that cold indifference is crueler than insults, and I completely agree. I never openly opposed Miranda. I simply acted as if she didn't exist. At breakfast, I spoke only to my mother-in-law and Elijah, completely ignoring Miranda's presence. If I walked into the living room and she was sitting there, I would act as if she were just another piece of furniture, head straight to the sofa, open my phone, and scroll through Instagram like I was the rightful lady of the house. And if she tried to speak to me, I would smile politely, answer with short, indifferent replies, then immediately shift the conversation to Elijah or his mother. I knew this would eat away at Miranda from the inside. And I was right. Within a week, she started leaving breakfast early, or some days, not showing up at all. Once, I caught her standing on the second-floor balcony, staring into the distance. I knew she was beginning to feel like a stranger in her own home. Perfect. I didn't just want Miranda to feel like she had lost control. I wanted her to question her own worth. One evening, when it was just the two of us in the kitchen, I took a sip of wine, set the glass down, and looked at her with feigned concern. Have you ever thought about going back to school? Miranda hesitated, setting down the knife she was using to slice apples. Why are you asking? She replied, her voice defensive, which only amused me more. I shrugged, keeping my tone light and casual. Oh, I just heard that you never went to college, right? I figured, with your potential, maybe taking some courses could open up new opportunities. She gave a short, dry laugh, but I saw the irritation flicker in her eyes. I have my own work. I don't need to go back to school. I nodded, as if I understood, but my voice remained gentle, almost too sympathetic. Of course, but sometimes having a degree can make a real difference. I saw her hands tighten into fists, but she said nothing more. I knew Miranda was single, and I knew she hated being reminded of it. Another evening, as we sat in the living room with my mother-in-law, I suddenly pretended to remember something and turned to Miranda with innocent curiosity. Oh, right. Miranda, have you ever tried using a dating app? My mother-in-law perked up with interest, while Miranda froze for a few seconds. What are you talking about? I laughed, shaking my head. I just thought, you're such an independent woman, but you're already 30 and still single. These days, most people find their partners through dating apps. My mother-in-law chuckled. Evelyn has a point, Miranda. Do you want me to introduce you to someone? Her face flushed red, but I pretended not to notice. Just don't be too picky, I added playfully. Good men are hard to find these days, especially when. I didn't need to finish the sentence. I saw the sting in her eyes, even as she tried to hide it. My psychological game was working. Miranda couldn't take it anymore. She started coming home later, avoiding me whenever possible. Perfect. That meant she was feeling pushed out, feeling like she no longer belonged here. I couldn't wait for the day she packed her bags and left this mansion on her own. But if she didn't, I had ways to make sure she would. I had expected a longer battle, but Miranda was disappointingly weak. I hadn't even done anything extreme, and yet she had already backed herself into a dark corner. In recent weeks, Miranda had all but disappeared from breakfast. She started leaving for work early, coming home late, avoiding any interaction with me. When I accidentally ran into her in the house, she would just nod, say nothing, and slip away like I was some kind of disease. How amusing! A lion, when losing its territory, would fight until the end. But Miranda simply retreated. But I wasn't satisfied yet. I didn't just want her to avoid me. I wanted her to feel the humiliation of living in this house until she realized she no longer belonged. And I knew the perfect way to speed up that process. I started invading the spaces Miranda considered hers. The study, her usual hideout after long workdays. I began using it as my personal office, leaving my documents there, reorganizing the books the way I wanted. One evening, when Miranda walked in and saw me sitting cross-legged in the chair, my laptop open, she froze. I simply shrugged and smiled. You don't mind if I use this room, do you? It's much quieter than the living room. I saw her fingers tighten, but she turned away without saying a word. The kitchen, where Miranda and Elijah's mother used to cook together before I arrived. I slowly changed everything. I suggested to my mother-in-law that we try a healthier diet, less oil, low-calorie meals, more trendy dishes. Miranda lost her place in the kitchen. Every time she tried to cook, I was already there, busy with my mother-in-law, making her presence feel unnecessary. Each small change was a blade slicing into her sense of belonging. One evening, Elijah and I sat on the sofa, laughing about our honeymoon plans. We were going to Hawaii, staying at a luxury resort I had picked. Miranda had just returned from work, exhausted, and as she stepped into the living room, I deliberately leaned into Elijah, smiling radiantly. I think we should try swimming with dolphins. I heard it's an amazing experience. Elijah laughed, squeezing my hand gently. Of course, anything you want. Miranda froze for a moment, then turned and walked away. But in that brief second, I saw it, the jealousy, the bitterness, the pain in her eyes. I took a sip of wine, feeling a thrill rush through me. A week later, on an evening when Elijah was away on a business trip, I sat in the living room with Miranda. Elijah's mother had gone to bed early. It was just the two of us. I placed my wine glass on the table, leaned back, and looked at her with a calm expression. "Miranda, have you ever thought about moving out?" She snapped her head up, staring at me. "Why would I do that?" I shrugged, my tone laced with fake concern. "You've lived here for so long, haven't you? I mean, you're 30, still unmarried, living with your mother. I just thought, maybe you'd enjoy having your own space." I saw her fingers tighten around the chair, her lips pressing into a firm line. But I didn't stop. Besides, I glanced around the room, deliberately sighing, "Elijah and I are married now. This is our home, too. Having a third person living here. I don't know, it feels a little strange." This time, I saw the unmistakable hurt in Miranda's eyes. "I'm Elijah's sister. I have every right to be here." I smiled, my voice still soft but heavy with meaning. "That's true. But are you sure you want to be here? I mean, do you actually enjoy living like this?" I didn't need to say another word. I saw her push herself up and storm out of the room, the door slamming behind her. I took another sip of wine, savoring the sweet taste of victory. She might not leave immediately, but I knew tonight she would lie awake thinking. And one day, she would pack her bags and leave this mansion, not because I forced her out, but because she would realize she no longer belonged. And me? I would stand here in this house with a satisfied smile on my lips. The big day had finally arrived. Today, I would officially become Mrs. Evelyn Watson, and nothing could stop me. That morning, as I stepped out of the bridal suite in my exquisite gown adorned with hundreds of crystals, I felt every pair of eyes turn toward me. But there was only one gaze I truly cared about, Miranda's. I wanted to see her face when she realized that today wasn't her day. It was mine. I walked slowly into the grand ballroom of the hotel, where the wedding reception was being held, savoring the admiration around me. Elijah stood at the front, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his eyes filled with adoration as he watched me. But I didn't rush to him just yet. I scanned the room. And then I spotted Miranda. She stood in the corner, wearing a plain navy blue dress, her hair neatly pinned up. She had little makeup on, looking dull, unremarkable, utterly forgettable. Just as I expected. I approached her with a slow, deliberate smile. "Miranda, you look so simple today." She lifted her gaze, her expression cold. "I'm here to celebrate Elijah. This is his day." I tilted my head, pretending not to hear her response. "You know," I said, gently running my fingers over my sparkling wedding ring, "I truly feel so lucky to be part of this family." I let the words sink in before adding, "The mansion will be Elijah's and mine from now on." Doesn't it feel strange to be at this age and still living with your mother and younger brother? Miranda inhaled sharply, and I noticed the way her hands clenched at her sides. "I have no reason to leave my home," she said, voice steady but tight. I let out a soft chuckle, leaning in just enough to whisper, "You really think it's your home?" Before she could respond, Elijah appeared, pulling me toward the stage with excitement. But I knew the damage had been done. What I had just said had planted doubt, deep and consuming, inside Miranda's mind. The ceremony was as extravagant as I had planned. Under the warm glow of golden lights, Elijah and I exchanged rings as delicate white petals fell from the ceiling. Applause erupted around us. I beamed, basking in the moment like a queen. But amid the sea of joyous faces, I kept my eyes on one person who wasn't celebrating. Miranda. She sat motionless, neither smiling nor offering congratulations, her gaze lost in the distance as if she no longer belonged. That was exactly what I wanted her to feel. This family, this house, everything was shifting, aligning to me. After the ceremony, guests moved to the banquet hall for the reception. I took a moment to seek Miranda out, one final confrontation. I found her in the family lounge, standing alone, seemingly deep in thought. I stepped inside, quietly shutting the door behind me. "How much longer do you plan on staying?" Miranda turned, her eyes flashing with wariness. "What are you talking about?" I moved closer, folding my arms across my chest. I just think, from now on, the mansion will be Elijah's and mine. You still living there, well, it seems a little inconvenient. I saw her fists clench. You're trying to push me out. I let out a soft laugh, tilting my head. I'm just stating the obvious, Miranda. I took another step forward, lowering my voice. An unmarried woman, no family of her own, a high school graduate, still living off her mother and brother. Do you really think you deserve that house? And there it was. The moment Miranda broke. She stared at me, rage and pain swirling in her eyes. But before she could respond, a voice cut through the air. Evelyn, what the hell are you saying? The door swung open. Elijah stood there. A chill ran down my spine. He had heard everything. Elijah stepped inside, his expression filled with anger. What did you just say to my sister? I blinked, quickly composing myself. Elijah, I was just talking to Miranda about the future. By telling her she doesn't deserve to stay in her own home? I opened my mouth to explain, but Elijah didn't give me the chance. Miranda has always been part of this family. But you, Evelyn? How long have you even been here? What gives you the right to decide who belongs and who doesn't? My heart pounded. I hadn't anticipated this. Elijah, I was just thinking about us. He shook his head, disappointment darkening his features. No, Evelyn. You were trying to get rid of someone you saw as a threat. I had never seen Elijah this angry before. He looked at me as if I were a complete stranger. Miranda remained silent, but for the first time, she was no longer the one losing. I walked out of that room with a fake smile still plastered on my face, but inside, my thoughts were racing. Elijah's attitude had shifted. He was no longer the man I thought I could control. I had expected today to be the day Miranda finally disappeared. But somehow, it was me who had been pushed out of control. I needed to turn this around. I had worked too hard to let everything slip away now. And if Miranda thought she had one, she was dead wrong. I had always believed I was the one in control, but the moment the door to the waiting room opened and I saw the deep disappointment in Elijah's eyes, I knew the game had changed. My wedding was supposed to be a flawless victory, my moment to shine, my moment to finally erase Miranda from my life and claim what was rightfully mine. But instead, I was the one backed into a corner. And worse, Elijah was on her side. I felt the loss of control creeping into my very bones, but I didn't let it show. A smart woman never reveals her weaknesses. I took a deep breath, keeping my smile intact as I looked at Elijah. You're misunderstanding me, Elijah. I just want what's best for Miranda, don't I? My voice was soft, tinged with just the right amount of sadness, as if I truly cared about Miranda's happiness. But Elijah wasn't buying my story anymore. Cut the act, Evelyn, he said, his voice cold. I stood here long enough to know exactly what you were trying to do. I opened my mouth to argue, but he shook his head, cutting me off. You didn't just insult my sister. You tried to force her out of the house. A house you haven't even contributed a single cent to renovate. I froze. What? Miranda stepped forward, and for the first time, she was no longer the weak one in this story. Let me tell you something, Evelyn. She looked straight into my eyes, her voice slow, deliberate. That mansion you're so desperate to take over? I paid for its renovations. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're lying. Miranda laughed, except this time, there was no pain in her eyes. What did you think? That I was just some high school graduate leeching off my mother. I clenched my fists, feeling my carefully constructed world crumble before me. I didn't know if Elijah fully believed her, but he wasn't looking at me the same way anymore. This isn't possible, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but the burning heat on my skin betrayed me. Elijah didn't hesitate anymore. Evelyn, I can't do this, he said slowly, but with certainty. I've seen the real you. A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean? Elijah pulled out an envelope and placed it on the table. Divorce papers. I can't stay married to someone like you. At that moment, I lost control. You've got to be kidding me, I scoffed, but my voice came out sharper, more desperate than I wanted. We just got married. This was an extravagant wedding. You're going to throw it all away over your sister. Elijah stared at me, but the love in his eyes was gone. No, Evelyn. You are the one who threw it away. The news of Elijah wanting a divorce spread like wildfire. That morning, I was a radiant bride. By nightfall, I was nothing more than a public spectacle, a joke for everyone to whisper about. The guests murmured, some watching me with pity, others with disdain. My wedding was no longer a celebration. It had become a tragic performance, and everyone was eager to watch the final act. My mother-in-law shook her head in disappointment. Even the people I once thought were on my side had turned away. And Miranda? She stood there, watching me, but this time, she wasn't the one who had lost. I gritted my teeth. I had lost. But I would never let this be the end of my story. I walked out of that wedding with my head held high, even as rage boiled inside me. Elijah could divorce me. Miranda could think she had one. But I was not the kind of woman who stayed defeated for long. I would come back. I would find a way to ensure that I never ended up in this position again. And next time, I wouldn't make the same mistakes. So there you have it. I only did what any smart woman would do. Was I really wrong for wanting a better life? Was I really wrong for taking what I deserved? But I guess the world still hates ambitious women, doesn't it? What do you guys think? Do I deserve this? Or am I just a victim of a fake little princess like Miranda? Leave a comment below and let me know whose side you're on. And don't forget to like, share, and follow my channel for more drama-filled stories just like this one.